Nukeduck, the mid laner, we're thinking going to be of Rocket perhaps soon. It's not entirely been announced. Is a player who at one point in time was considered one of the best in Europe. He's certainly always been considered one of the most talented players in Europe and always been looked at as a player where if he got back into LCS, if he was in LCS again, then people would expect big things from him. If we go down to his skills and things he's good at, you'll see why he's always been a very good player. But actually the key quality I want to talk about is his personality, his attitude, his mindset, because there's a special arrogance that he has that actually comes from being good and what he's capable of that I think is crucial to kind of elucidate people on why this has like positive qualities to it, even if often arrogance and thinking highly of yourself is portrayed as something that's like a negative quality and will only take away from a team aspect in a team game where it's not just about the individual. So first of all, Let's break down a bit who Nukeduck is, because I know some people won't have seen him when he was in LCS all the way back in 2013. First of all, he's a really dominant lane player. Like, he's the guy who goes for those kills in lane and tries to snowball his lane in mid lane, get 2-3 kills up just during the laning phase. He was deadly on Assassins. This is when he rose up in Lemon Dogs, and they finished first in the regular portion of EU LCS Summer Split in 2013, was when Assassin meta was really broken. And so he would get super farmed, he'd get all these kills, he'd roam, he'd get kills everywhere, and he was deadly on Assassins. Like Fizz, Zed, particularly his Zed was very, very good. His Ahri was good. Side note, he was also a very good Twisted Fate player, actually. It was a very good champion for him. He's someone who he actually demands to be the focal point of the team. There's a story that Tabs told me in my Reflections interview with Tabs that really shows the mentality of Nukeduck in this sense that he is going to be the star of this team. He is going to be the focal point. Everything is going to be set up so that he will succeed and win the game. This story shows it. So during a game for Lemon Dogs, Tabs was the AD carry player there. A big wave had built up on the bottom lane where Tabs plays, obviously. And Tabs had backed for some reason, and he was just buying something in spawn at the fountain, and then as he was coming off the fountain, he was heading towards that bottom lane, and he said that Nukeduck just said to him, Tabs, come back, go mid lane, I'm going to go bottom lane, and I'm going to take that massive wave. And in another world, another sort of team, the AD carry would say, well, no, I'm the AD carry, like, I need that, I want to get fed, like, it's my lane. But this was just the way it was. Nukeduck was the best player in that team, he was the focal point of that team, and he got to make those sorts of shot calls in that sense. So it was up to him, and he was, listen, the key thing about that, as I'll go into later, is by doing that, yeah, that means when you fail, it's also going to be on you as well. But that's the thing, you're taking the responsibility on, like, listen, I'm going to win this game, I can do it, I believe in me. And so that's the thing with this guy, that gives you a little insight into his personality. His personality, he's a cocky guy. He likes to style on people, show off that he's better than them. He's arrogant. He thinks he's the best. He thinks he can be the best. If someone else is good, he's like, okay, he's good, but I can be better. I can beat him. He feels entitled, like he should be the best. Like, well, if the game's working properly and I have the right team, then I should be better than you, and I should be ahead, and I should be the best mid laner in Europe. I should be the best Western mid laner. He really does feel this way. If you want to see some more examples, let's go back to that same time period in Season 3 World Championship. He goes to Worlds, his first big major international tournament. He gets to play against Faker in the first game. And this is where everyone's watched OGN. They'd all seen Faker do the Z outplay on Ryu from KTB. Everyone knew already that Faker was a god. Like, his skills were incredible. It's not like Faker was some secret. So he gets to play against Faker, okay. You'd think, even if you're a really good EU mid laner, EU has all the mids, obviously, you'd still think that you'd think, oh, well, I should probably be a bit careful with this guy. Nah. In this game, this was the one where he lets Faker have Ahri, which is a champion. If you know what Faker's skills were like in playmaking assassin-type champions, he was fucking unreal. He gives Faker Ahri, and then he decides to counterpick it with Swain, which, okay, on solo queue logic, that's like a counter pick. Like, if you're playing versus just an average guy at your level on solo queue, yeah, you could make that work, you could win. But he gave the best player in the world, one of his best champions, picked against it something that he might have used sometimes in solo queue, but it wasn't something that he was using in like actual LCS games before. It wasn't something that was even a meta pick at the time for pro level play. And, well, we all know it didn't work. He got destroyed. Faker had an awesome game, he won. Later in the same tournament, he plays against TSM for the first time. Now, at the time, you have to realise this was the end of Reginald's career. So other really awesome players didn't think highly of Reginald. They thought like, oh, he's got a good team, a really good team, like one of the best in North America. But his best days are way past him. And because Reginald was known as a cocky player, people like Nukeduck were like, well, fuck that guy, I'm better than him. Like, I'm more skilled, what do I care? It's just some old player. Like, you know, he's from North America, they don't even have the good mids. Like, we're Europe with the mids. So this was the mentality that Nukeduck had. And so as a result, Nukeduck gave Reginald Zed at a time when Zed was its most broken, and that was one of Reginald's best champions. Like, if you saw how the pick ban went, they really could have easily taken Zed away from Reginald. But Nukeduck's mentality, and he played Ari, was, fuck it, let him have Zed. Let him have his best champion, and I'll, like, style on him. Like, I'll really show him, not only am I, like, better than you, I'm better than you on your best champion. I'll just dumpster you completely and, you know, you over any. That sort of, it was almost that sort of mentality. That's kind of what he was showing in the game, and he lost. Reginald got, like, 9 kills, like 9-1 something on Zed. It was ridiculous. Like, this sort of flagrant nonchalance, in this sense, actually was kind of a bad quality. So, in terms of Nukeduck as a person, he really does, like I say, he believes he can be the best, or he believes he is the best, or he believes that he will be the best if circumstances all arrive. That's actually something that if you look at a lot of the great players in League of Legends, the really good ones, they all share this quality, but maybe they express it in different ways. Maybe they wouldn't seem as arrogant. Maybe some of them keep it inside a bit more. Like a few that come to mind is Froggen, Diamond Prox, Xpecial, in more recent times, Forgiven. So let's go through some of those. Froggen. Nowadays, Froggen knows how to play the PR game. His time in CLGU taught him that very well. But listen, Froggen, the early Froggen, and Froggen, if you could get to him and frame the debate in the right way, he's a very confident guy. He knows that there's other great players, and there's other great players in Europe and in the West, etc. But he knows that he can be the best. He should be the best. He has the tools to be the best. He has the tools where he shouldn't have to fear anyone. He should believe he can beat anyone in the West. I even used to say, if you remember on the Summoning Insight episode, I actually really think that Froggen was the player of anyone I wanted to see go up against Faker, because I really think Froggen would have had that mentality, almost not quite as bad as Nukeduck did when he played Faker in the scenario I gave before, where he'd like get take a ridiculous counter pick. But I really think that Froggen thinks that if he got a good champion, and Faker was on not like a game-breaking champion, that Froggen thinks he could compete, that he could do something for his team in that game. He could neutralize him in some sense, or he wouldn't get dumpstered the same way other people have. I really think Froggen believes that he has that innate confidence in himself, and that's why you don't see him kind of break down mentally often, and you don't see him when his team loses in a scenario where he's blaming someone else or whatever. He still thinks that, listen, my team's decent enough, I'm good enough, I can be the best, I can improve my level, I can play better, we can still win. Diamond Prox, there's an obvious player where this guy had arrogance in a beautiful manner. It was a way where it was like to defeat the opponent, no, destroy the opponent, to intimidate the opponent with how good you are, to style him completely, to show him no respect, to beat him and sort of literally say afterwards, like, I don't even consider him a good player, or like, there are only 3 good players in the world and he's not, you know, a sort of ridiculous thing. But you could see this, it was coming from a place of confidence, of knowing how good you are, how good you can be better than this other guy who might look good to when he plays everyone else. Xpecial, another great example. Xpecial seems, because he comes off in his vlogs like, yeah, he's a nice guy, and it's very low tone. No, Xpecial the whole time thinks that his team should win every single time. He knows that they can win. He knows he can be the best support. He knows that no matter who he goes against, there's an arrogance there. If you ever watched that grilled interview I did with Xpecial after Worlds, where his team's got out in the group stage, he's still talking like, listen, in the other group we would have gotten out, we were beating all these teams in scrims. You know, in scrims, no bot lane gave us troubles, we were better than them. This guy's a very confident guy, and obviously a modern day example, Forgiven. Forgiven only played 1 fucking LCS split for a team that finished like 6th place or something, and yet this guy was a beast in game, and he had the attitude as if he was a superstar, of like, give me everything, this is how I want it to be, it's so demanding, but he did have a performance value. And you can see all these players, yes, the arrogance is kind of comes part and parcel of knowing that they're that good and having that belief and never doubting in a way that would harm them or would break them apart and give a weakness that the enemy could attack and open up. There's a great sports example I'll tie in here. Kobe Bryant is one of the best players of all time. He's one of the most dominant players in his physical peak and his skill set peak. And he's won, just as the main star of his teams, he won 2 NBA titles, and as the second option, he won 3 before that. But when he was a young player and he was coming up on the Lakers, the Lakers was a team that was actually a really skilled team initially. They had lots of like star level players. In fact, there's like an all-star game in like 98 where they had like 4 of their players got into their team, including Kobe. And so as a young guy, actually the coaches used to sort of hold him back a bit and used to limit his minutes and try to only use him in certain scenarios because they knew he had the mentality, even though he was only a young 18-year-old guy, they knew he had the mentality that he wanted to test himself and believed he could be the best and wanted to push himself and take as many shots as he could and do crazy shots. So they were trying to limit him, like, oh, this is a waste of time, that's inefficient, we've got good players right now, like, just learn your place, kid, like, move up gradually. And so when Phil Jackson, this legendary guy who's probably the best coach in NBA history, and had already won 6 championships with the Bulls, playing with Michael Jordan as a player, rather, who plays the same position Kobe Bryant does, shooting guard, and was a dominant main star player, you'd think to yourself, like, okay, Phil Jackson would just embrace that immediately and be like, yeah, that's great, I'm going to have you do that exactly. The problem was, in the Michael Jordan teams, it made sense to have Michael Jordan be the main star. In this team, Phil Jackson knew that he had Shaquille O'Neal, who was not only in his peak, like a total beast, one of the best centers ever, but played the center position, which is easier to score from. You get more high percentage shots. So actually in that team, you want it to be how it eventually was, which is you need the center to be the main guy, and then you can have the shooting guard be like the second star, or he plays off him when the center doesn't have a good shot, he throws it back out and the shooting guard takes a shot. That's the dynamic you want to have. So then, okay, thinking this way, you'd think to him, right, well, now Phil Jackson's going to have a really difficult time because he's going to have to convince this Kobe Bryant guy, like, listen, you got to ease up, kid. Like, don't try and be the star. Don't try and take over the game. Don't try and exert yourself totally. Just play within a role, do this here, and limit yourself a bit. Don't be like that. But actually, what's interesting is Phil Jackson knew how delicate the ego aspect of this was and how delicate this topic would be, the nuances and the subtlety, that actually he needed to be very careful with how he trod that line of letting Kobe Bryant like develop and be good, and then limiting to a degree to work within the team concept. And so what's interesting is very early on when he just joined the Lakers, there was an assistant coach or someone made some comment like saying about, I can't remember if it's an assistant coach or another player, made some comment saying like, oh, Kobe's like taking too many shots, like he's trying to take over the game, like, oh, do something about it, Phil. And Phil Jackson said something along the lines of like he acknowledged, like, yeah, that's like not good for our team right now. But he said something like, don't ever try and convince Kobe not to play that way. Like, don't ever try and like break that mentality and tell him he can't do that and he shouldn't ever do it and break him out of it and make it so it's not part of his game. Because even though right now he's like a young guy who's like hasn't developed enough, he's not worthy, or he can't actually live up to the demands of being that main star in the same way the guy we have right now. Don't ever do that, because even though he can't right now, that mentality of being the best, that killer instinct, that always going for it and pushing yourself, is what one day will make him a great player. That's what Phil Jackson said. And if you look at the way Kobe Bryant's career went, it's true, it made him a great player. It didn't make him a great player for like 4 or 5 years. He didn't have a chance to win for like 8 or 9 years. So yeah, there was something to both sides of it. But you can see how that arrogance, that belief, that lack of doubt, crucially the doubt is what cripples a lot of people, was a strength. It just had to be turned into a strength. It had to be channeled in that way. It had to be sharpened so that all the difficult aspects that could cut back on you or be dangerous or not quite work the way they could, that all had to be figured out. But the difference was, this was a good quality. What you wanted to work on wasn't getting rid of it and then building something new. It was having what you had there and then just taking away some of the unnecessary parts, and then it would be pure and it would be very good and it would be efficient in its own way. So this is a core concept to understand, because as I'm going to build now, that's one of the great things about Nukeduck, this arrogance. And that's something that I think is great about Forgiven, who I referenced already, because these are both players who haven't really got to go to the elite level. They've never done what people like Frog and Alex Hitch have in their careers, or like Wei Zhao and Doublelift, whatever position you're talking about in general. But as a concept, that idea of having this arrogance, not having doubt and hesitation, I think it's a very relevant topic for this era, because first of all, that often gets spun off as they're toxic and they're a bad team presence, whereas actually they've been able to work within teams as long as the team's set up around that, so it works in the favour of the team. In terms of actual players who are up-and-coming talents, or they're the next big thing, I'm actually getting really sick of this trend that we have in the West, which is that all these players who everyone says, oh, his potential is really good, oh, he's really, really talented, he just needs to get his consistency together, oh, he's so good, but he hasn't quite figured out his nerve issues and all that. It feels like every fucking talent in the West is some guy where, pardon my French, is like a pussy. It's like, oh, he's a really talented guy. And he's got so much going for him. And it's like, here's the big game. Throw him the ball. It's like, oh, he whiffed it completely. Oh, the nerves. Whew, sweat's pouring down his head. Oh, God, I'm losing it. Mom's spaghetti, knees weak, arms are heavy. All that shit. Like, come on, man. Is there no one here who's really skilled, who really wants to be the best? Who's like, fuck it, put me in the game, coach. Like, I'll hit this. I'm the hero. I'll play this. Like, actually has the spirit, the motivation, the fire to know that they can do it. Not to be the guy where, like, everyone else is telling them they can do it. The Bjergsen and the Rekkles guy where everyone's saying, listen, the Link, where everyone's like, listen, you're really good, like, just play the game, like, we love this, you're going to win. You're like, yeah, I'm going to win. And I guys, shit, things are going badly. Just, like, completely bottles it. We've seen too many of those. It feels like there's so many of them. The pole belters, the Links. How many fucking guys do we have to run down the list of who are like the talent guy, but then they don't show up in that big time, or they're having problems, or it takes them a long time to transition into it. Some of these other guys, yeah, they're assholes now, and yeah, they've got problems and they're toxic, etc. But it's easier to work with them and shape them into something, or find a team that can work around them right now, could work right now, than have to develop these other guys and fucking sit on couches with them. Like, and what was it about your father that crippled your confidence as a boy? Like, come on, man, this is like fucking... It's not even a fair debate. Actually, the asshole wins out in that scenario. It's easier to work with him. So when I mentioned those players there, I'm sure already some of the fanboys are like, oh, I'm up on my haunches. Did he just say Rekkles? He has the best KDA in the universe. And Bjergsen, the star of LCS summer and playoffs. Yeah, that's the point I'm making though. These guys, Bjergsen and Rekkles, are the great counterpoints. Because first of all, Bjergsen is a mid laner, very similar style to Nukeduck, even the same champions to some degree. Forgiven and Rekkles, both AD carries, both in theory should be the dominant AD carry, the star AD carry, but one doesn't play like it, one does. So if you want to give some trends of this, let's talk about Bjergsen and Rekkles in terms of how they fit into this role where, listen, when I said they're pussies, that's like hyperbole, obviously. I just mean in terms of like, they're not like the hero guy, they're not like the man's man, they're not like the guy who's like leading like, and I'm going to go out on my shield, I'm going to give my best, and I don't get nervous because fuck it, what's the point in being nervous? I just play the game and I'm a man. Like, they're not that sort of guy, unfortunately. Their personalities aren't like that, and they haven't been able to develop into that, at least so far. And that's been a problem in their careers. So, I mean, an example I'm going to give now that might sound weird. When Rekkles lost that game at the World Championship recently, and he started crying, like, I'm not one of these guys who's like, hey, oh look, he's crying, that's funny. Human beings actually tortured in his soul and feeling pain for who he is as a person and his efforts. Like, I didn't think that was funny. I actually felt quite sorry for the guy. Like, oh, I pity him. Like, I think he's a good player and I know he can accomplish more. And what a horrible moment to have all that go wrong for you on a world stage where maybe you had such high hopes that this would be your chance. And last year you didn't get to play and now you did. I actually felt quite sorry for him. But I have to say that the way he was broken down like that showed like a really extreme, overemphasized version of the problems he's had in his career, where sometimes he has shied away a little bit from the moment and he hasn't been able to have the full impact that maybe his skills say he should, or maybe he even himself believes he should. And that's a problem that's played into this aspect of like, he hasn't got the killer instinct to the same degree some of these other players do. A lot of the players I mentioned before, Froggen, Diamond Prox, these sorts of guys, part of the killer instinct, part of this mentality is when you see them lose, they look angry at themselves. They're not angry at like, oh, everything else, you fucked up all the time, or like, oh man, I got beaten and I'm so broken down. Their mentality is more like, fuck, I know I could have done better, I should do better, I will do better next time. That's like the sort of mentality, that's like a winner's mentality. It's the way they pick themselves up every time naturally. Now maybe Rekkles has to develop this, I don't know. He is a young guy, there was a lot of pressure, but he doesn't innately seem to have that to the same degree some of these other guys do. In terms of Bjergsen, everyone's going to have that vivid memory of him carrying an ALCS playoffs. Looked awesome, didn't he? Well, do you remember what happened during the previous playoffs, the season before? He got to the final, played against Cloud9 in the spring split final, and just did nothing and looked very weak actually. Couldn't exert himself, even though champions were there that he could play. Then you come across to the regular split of the summer season, and he was one of the reasons they were struggling. His shot calling was bad, and then his individual game was really off sometimes, and certain players like Zhao could outperform him sometimes in the league. Link was doing better as a mid laner. He was having real problems, even though in theory he's by far the best mid laner in the region. He should have been able to dominate. This should have been his playground, like it was in the spring split when he'd had that strong start. He should have been dominating the whole time, but clearly something was getting to him. Something was making him question himself, or he wasn't playing the game the way he could, or he wasn't demanding to be the star and be the focal point. That's why I brought up that example before. Because when we compare these players, so Nukeduck versus Bjergsen, Forgiven versus Rekkles, yes, in terms of accomplishment and great players, the ones who I've billed as like the the less confident ones, so Bjergsen and Rekkles, they are much greater players historically. They've got better accomplishments, played in better teams. They've even overall maybe had some better performances. That part's debatable. Nukeduck and Forgiven, I purposely picked them to highlight the extreme nature of this sort of example, because rather than pick players who've also accomplished as much, so it'd be too obvious, I picked players where they've got the skills, but they either haven't been in enough good teams, or they haven't had quite the chance, or it's been held back in some sense, because these guys, Forgiven and Nukeduck, like I said, demand to be the star. Okay, so I gave the example before of Nukeduck telling Tabs, like, get out that lane, I'm going to take all that farm. Forgiven demanded to be the star. It was like, everything in this team is going to be based on me getting my picks, my strong champions like Lucian, Kate. We're going to lane swap every time I need to so I always get up and farm, and I'm going to carry the whole game. Just play the whole game I want it, and I'll carry this whole game. In its own way, that is good, because, yeah, there's a negative to it, which is that if you lose, then rightly so, you can be blamed like, well, you're the star and you didn't perform. But there's a good side to it, which is that you're saying, I want the responsibility of that. And if we win, yeah, I'm going to have the praise because I'm the star and I've set everything up that way. But I'm also willing to take the responsibility of the negative side. Now, we can all credit that's good to accept that responsibility like that. It might sound arrogant to say like that, but people don't credit that when people like Rekkles and Bjergsen sometimes shy away from being the star. What they're saying there to me is the other side of that. Like, I just want it to be like everyone's an equal person. Well, then there's equal blame when everyone loses. And suddenly there isn't all the focal point. Now, we don't ask, did this star who did decently but not as well? Was he set up to be the star and then he couldn't deliver? We don't have to ask any of those questions. But if you're one of the best players in your team, you must do that, in my opinion. All the greatest teams of all time, their star player was a primary focus. He had massive game impact. He demanded that role. He was the best. It's just the way you look through history, you can see all these teams. In terms of this concept, the reason why I've brought it up is because, like I say, I think it's easier to work with the Nukeduck Forgiven guys. I know they're very difficult. The difference is when I know it's like that, I'm like, listen, okay, I'm going to make you the star, and I'm going to build my team around you. I'm going to give you, like, in the case of Forgiven, I'd give him a support player who's, like, strong coupled with a laner, but he has to have a personality that's easygoing. It's able to take some abuse every now and then. Is able to submit to doing exactly what this guy wants, like the Zero Uzi I relationship. That's how I want it. In terms of mid laner like Nukeduck, I want a jungler who knows that his job is just 24/7 try and get Nukeduck ahead, give Nukeduck cover, camp Nukeduck's lane when you need to. It's all going to be about Nukeduck. We know that's the way it is. I need a top laner probably who can play 1v2 like Zoro Zero could, who can just play off, who doesn't mind that he's not going to have a lot of jungle pressure. This is the way you can design a team, and you can see that they've already had success in the past and why they've gotten really strong teams overall. You can build that around him. You can take it away so that his cockiness and arrogance is actually now good qualities. It's like self-confidence, doesn't doubt himself, doesn't hesitate, goes for it, wants to be the star, wants to carry. You can make it into a positive if it has the right approach. And in time, maybe you can also polish some of those rough edges off. Like he can learn, like Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant did, like you can learn to trust certain teammates at certain times and give up a little bit of control sometimes. You're still going to be dominant, but be a bit more efficient with it. Don't always force the matter and pick ridiculous, in this particular case, pick ridiculous picks and try to make something work to show someone. Learn to play a more of a conservative game, have a bit more of a complete game, like a Froggen type guy. The reason why I set it up like that is because people only acknowledge the good part of those lesser guys who are like, they get worried and stuff like, oh, but they've got all the talent and, you know, they're great guys, they're such good teammates. Yeah, but that's part of the problem. How do we fix their problem? I've explained how we can fix the asshole guy's problem, but how do we fix the guy who's got the brilliance, the arrogance of knowing they're brilliant innately? How do we fix the guy where they don't embrace their brilliance? They don't have the arrogance. Well, here's the problem. They're not as confident. They're not willing to even think like, I deserve the role of being the star, or I should be the star, or I'm going to be the star, or tell everyone I demand that I be the star. Because they're not like that, well, who the fuck? There is no answer to how do you build someone's confidence up? How do you get them motivated? How do you make them believe that they're worthy and that they're a star? Like, these are incredibly difficult questions. These are things for a fucking team of psychiatrists to do, and someone with a degree in psychology to explain why they're supposed to have these problems. And then, like I say, have someone sitting back on a couch talking about things other in their life to figure out what problems have caused them to get to this point where they have this incredible skill set. They should be very confident, but they're getting nervous under pressure, or they're shying away from the spotlight. These are incredibly hard things to figure out. And if you look in the history of sports and esports, those ones, it's way less often that those guys figure it out and truly unlock all their potential, as opposed to, it's a lot more often that like asshole alpha male type guys who are very strong players can at least either have success just on that or start to figure things out to some degree about the team game to at least incorporate it more. And I think those people, these alpha male guys in sports history especially, they are the ones who are more successful and are the dominant ones who win many, many, many championships. The guys with the other personality, they can be great players. They can be very good players, like a LeBron James type guy, Scottie Pippen type guy. They can be great players, John Stockton. But in general, they don't tend to win as much. They tend to be more like, oh, if I win now, that's good. I try my best. We all win as a team. We lose as a team. Like, they don't seem to have the same level of success. And I think this dichotomy of mentality that I've set up is why. And I hope this is a valid point for people and that people can understand the point I'm making. There can be discussion around this. And I'm not saying Bjergsen is worse than Nukeduck. Right now, Bjergsen is a better player. But if you took Bjergsen's skills, which are very similar to Nukeduck's, and you had the mindset of Nukeduck, I think Bjergsen would be the best mid laner in the world, in the West rather. I think likewise, if you give Rekkles Forgiven's mentality, with his team he just had last season, could be the best AD carry in all of the West by far, with no questions asked, and one of the very best in the world. He'd be up there with some of those Asian guys.